I love to run, and I live in the suburbs of Philly, so there are a lot of trails and parks. I take my Boston Terrier with me. She makes me feel more or less secure when I'm alone, even though she's only about 30 pounds. We do farlek, which is Swedish for speed play. For those of you that don't know, it's a form of interval training on varied terrain. It's good for running with my dog. Because she has a short nose, she's sensitive to overexertion, and I don't want her to have any breathing issues. We were at the park on a warm fall day. We had stopped our run and I was standing in a remote wooded area so she could sniff. I could hear some people through the trees playing softball, the dull echo of the aluminum bat and people shouting echoing through the air. My dog sniffed for about 5 minutes before she lifted one front paw with a woof. I looked in her direction and saw a man through the trees. He had his back to me, but I could tell he was Caucasian with short brown hair and wearing a white t-shirt and basketball shorts. I reassured her we were okay and moved along, but my dog kept turning around and looking at the man or planting her feet in the ground, hackles raised the entire time. Pulling her along, I noticed the man jogging alongside us. That wasn't particularly easy to do, since he wasn't running on a defined path, and there's high brush, poison ivy, and thorny multiflora rose plants in these woods. I'm a naturally paranoid person, but I rationalized that maybe he had a dog off the leash somewhere, or was geocaching. But he took all the same trails parallel to the path for a good half a mile, keeping pace with us the entire time. We came to the area where the trees thinned to meet the curve of the trail, and the man was closing in. I wanted to pass him before we would intersect. I'm a little self-conscious running aside others, and my dog loves people, so I didn't want her to get too excited and startle him. Plus, when she sees other runners, she won't chase them, but gets convinced that she's in a race with them to be first. She still had her hackles raised and wouldn't stop turning her head to stare at the man no matter how fast we ran. Finally, the man picked up a burst of speed and darted out in front of us and stopped. He pivoted to face us. His arms were covered in scratches and rashes, probably from the plants I mentioned. That's when I noticed his junk was hanging out of the waistband of his shorts. My dog went apeshit, barking and growling like I'd never seen or heard her before. He looked at me with a sickening grin and said, "Be careful, there are wild animals in these woods," and ran back into the woods in the opposite direction, the whole time laughing like a hyena with his dong flapping against his legs. My dog was still barking up a storm and tried to pull after him, but I noped in the opposite direction back to my car. I never reported it to the police, just because I didn't think there was much they could do, but next time, I'll make sure to listen to my dog. This story takes place in America in the early 1980s, before my mom was married. She lived with her sister's husband, and their 3 dogs. My mother's family is from Ireland, and so is my aunt's husband. His sister Mary Catherine was visiting the States for a few weeks. During the daytime, everyone worked, so it was just Mary Catherine at home with the 3 dogs, Princess, a German Shepherd Standard Collie mix, Kelly, a German Shepherd Husky, and Mickey, a massive, illegal wolf mix. All 3 dogs were big hams, but fiercely protective. One day, my mom came home from work to find the lights turned out, shades drawn and doors locked. She thought maybe Mary Catherine had gone for a walk, but when she opened the door, she met Mary, standing white as a sheet with a knife in her hand. "Oh, Patsy, something terrible happened today. We had a visitor," she spoke. Around noon, Mary was in the kitchen fixing herself some lunch when she heard the front door open. The dogs went crazy, howling and barking. The dogs never bark at family, so she went to see who it was. It was a man. A man she had never seen before had let himself in through the unlocked door and was sitting on the couch. The dog stood on the staircase landing adjacent to the couch and refused to go near him. Before she could ask who he was, he said, "I'm very thirsty. Could you get me a drink of water?" She figured he was just a neighbor, or maybe his car had broken down. The house was situated in a remote and relatively safe area, so she didn't think of him as a threat. Plus, she was from a small village where she knew everyone, and unexpected guests were the norm for her. He sat on the sofa so casually, like he was waiting for someone. She said hello, and went into the kitchen to get him something to drink, ushering the dogs in with her to avoid making a fuss. They were very angry, growling at the man with their hackles raised, but they still didn't approach him. She had her back turned at the kitchen sink, filling up a glass for him, when she felt a hand clap on her shoulder. "Are you waiting for someone? The family won't be home for a while," Mary said nervously. "I know they won't," the man replied coldly. Mary whipped around to face him. "You know," he said, "you're a good-looking woman, and I'm a good-looking man." The dogs backed up against her, barking and howling. She reached behind her to grab a knife off the block in one hand and the glass of water in the other. "I think you should drink your water and be on your way." The man stood there and drank his water, while Mary stood there with the dogs. She watched him place his glass on the table, open the door, go down the steps, and walk into the street until she lost sight of him. Once everyone was home, my mother called the police. There wasn't much they could do since Mary wasn't hurt, and they hadn't heard any reports of break-ins or assault lately, so they just took a statement. My family always tells this story as an example of how Irish people tend to downplay unfortunate situations almost humorously. The Irish comedian Tommy Tiernan calls this a fundamental darkness that the Irish people have. We laugh at the blackness in life. But it leaves a lot of questions unanswered. Had the man been watching the house to know everyone's schedule, knew that Mary wasn't from around here, and was going to take advantage of her? Or was he just a wandering creep looking for unlocked doors? This started 8 years ago, and went on for about a year. I was a fairly young kid who lived in a trailer park between 2 towns in eastern Iowa. Each town was about 5 miles out, and there wasn't much to them, at the time. The trailer park was pretty desolate, and it was consumed by fields of corn and timber. Back then, it wasn't hard for me and my childhood friend Brock, who I am still in contact with today, to stay occupied. Cap guns and lightsaber battles were part of our daily agenda. It was nice and simple. However, things started to spiral a bit, and I'm still trying to come to grips with them today. It was a cloudy and musty overhang summer day. My friend and I had been doing our normal ritual of pretending to fight off Sith overlords, until one of us, and I'm not exactly sure who, had the bright idea to bring the game into the cornfield. Our game shifted to the cornfield, and it was really cool, until about 10 minutes in. We got so into the game that at some point we had split up. After 10 minutes or so, my friend and I regrouped back in the cornfield. That is when we noticed something that still haunts me. About 15 yards away was a distinguishable figure moving towards us. It was clearly a man, and he was roughly 6 feet tall. The man was looking me straight in the eyes. I remember his face and appearance clearly. He was wearing torn-up jeans and a white shirt with sweat stains. His face was beaten up, had scars, and he had a slight purple tint to his lips. We were frozen in shock as he moved towards us, speeding up rapidly. I could see the malevolent intentions in his eyes. I was frozen for 10 or 15 seconds before I realized my friend had already booked it out of there. I immediately took off after him and soon caught up to him. We ran for probably 5 minutes straight, not even looking behind us, before we ended up making it out of the cornfield, regrouped once again, and made it to the safety of his grandmother's. We then made a pact to never tell each other's grandparents for fear of not being allowed to return to the area and play. However, it doesn't end there. A week later, things became more odd. Daily occurrences would happen. My grandfather would leave for work every morning at 7 a.m. sharp, and he would find random trinkets and surprises on our porch each day. However, they were never the same. To give a gist of some of the items, the ones I recall were a severed doll's head, some notes with gibberish written on them, paper bags of human feces, and a pair of muddy shoes. Fast forward some time. It was midsummer now, and the collection of random items had come to a halt. I wished to say it was all over, but it wasn't. One night I had been gently falling asleep in my bed when I heard a soft knock on my window. Keep in mind, I lived directly across the street from the cornfield where my friend and I had had the first encounter. I hadn't been frightened by the knock, as I figured it was just Brock wanting me to sneak out with him to fuck around. I peeked out my blinds. I was wrong. I saw the familiar silhouette dimly lit by the streetlights, his arms raised up waving at me, and I could see his yellow crooked smile dancing across his face. I closed my blinds, rushed to my grandparents' room, and, scared shitless, told them what happened, and told them about the first encounter with my friend. They immediately dialed the police, who showed up very quickly and made a futile attempt to comfort me and find the mystery man. Another week or so later comes the final encounter. My friend and I were not allowed to go anywhere alone. We either had to escort each other or be accompanied by an adult. On the night of the last encounter, we were at my friend's house in the yard tossing a football. Daylight was dwindling and fading into night. My friend and I were about 20 feet apart playing catch when I had thrown the ball over his head and he had gone to retrieve it. As he went back to get it, I noticed his attention shift towards the alley which led to his shed. His face grew pale as he walked towards me, trying to play it off, but he was obviously scared. He shoved me into the door and alerted his grandmother. He said, "He's in the shed. He's in the shed and has a knife. Call the police." His grandmother, having been filled in by my grandparents, didn't take a second thought and dialed them immediately. The police showed up and had to escort the man out of the shed and warned him not to return. It turns out he had been following my friend and I around since our first encounter and had been taking shelter in their shed since it had never been locked. We've both moved away from the neighborhood since then and never spoke a word of it again. I'm a 13-year-old female now, but when this happened, I was only 8 years old. And I really hope no one judges me for all these stupid mistakes I made as a child. I had just gotten my first Facebook, and before you ask where my mom was, she said it was okay. She's not a bad mom at all. She taught me all about internet safety, but I stupidly disobeyed. I loved the game called Yoville, which is basically another Sims, but by Facebook. That's the best way I can describe it. Now, around this time my best friend had introduced me to corn. Let's let you decide what this is. Well, somehow, I got to another person's house and saw pictures of children. I'm not going to go into details. It wasn't corn, but it was creepy as hell and I was terrified. I met a guy there, Bob, and we started talking. I stupidly told him where I lived, city and state, and he recommended that we meet, to which I agreed. He said he was in a wheelchair, so I figured he couldn't hurt me then, right? Wrong. I was so wrong. He came to my house sometime in spring. I told him when I was going to be home alone. He arrived, and to my 8-year-old shock, he was standing upright. I was terrified. The door was wide open, and he could have just came in. I was about to cry. I was scared he would kill me or steal me from my house. I didn't know much about rape, so that didn't even cross my mind. I slammed the door, ran to my room, and used my phone to call 911. 911, what's your emergency? I whispered. I live at 123 Pine Lane, and I'm going to get robbed and killed. The lady on the phone was hesitant, but then said, Why, honey? I sobbed and told her the incident. She told me an officer would be on the way in 10 minutes and for me to stay on the phone. By this time, Bob was screaming and pounding on the door. Then, it stopped. I was relieved. Then I heard my gate open and close. I was crying so hard now, and I was hoping he was gone for good. Then, I heard a window smash, and I hung up and turned off my phone, hoping he wouldn't hear it. I climbed under my bed as quickly as I could, as I heard my stairs creaking, slowly and steadily. I was so scared. He started slamming open doors, and I could hear him rummaging through things. He eventually made his way to the room I was in. He slammed open the door and started searching the room. I remained in a completely frozen state, trying not to even breathe, until I heard him leave. Somehow, he didn't think to look under my bed, maybe because I had drawers on one side of the bed. He then started to say, in a childish voice, "Come out, Katie. I just want to talk." I was panicking and still trying to decide what to do when I heard the sirens. I was so happy. I then heard the man run towards the living room, and then I heard the door being busted down. The police came in screaming, and I heard a gunshot. I thought he had shot the police, but it was the other way around. He survived, but was arrested on multiple charges. Some of his charges included possession of illegal drugs, rape drugs, possession of an illegally purchased weapon, breaking and entering, attempted rape, and much more. I only found out most of these details when I was 12 and my mom told me what happened after the police got him. It's still hard to think about what he would have done to me if I hadn't had the opportunity to call the police that day. He won't get out until 2016, and by that time Bob will most likely be dead or about 90 years old. We have already left the state, and I don't have Facebook anymore. So, to anyone this may concern, make sure your children know the dangers of the internet, and always monitor your kids' social media accounts. And if you're a child, try listening to your parents about internet safety, because you never really know who's on the other end of the conversation. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate if you'd leave a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe for future content. If you would like a chance to have your story featured in an upcoming video, make sure you check the description for information on how to submit your stories. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you in the next video. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true.